and click Start. And Scott, you are live.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon. My name is Scott Murray. I am a cybersecurity specialist at Microsoft focused on cybersecurity in and around modern workplace. It means Azure Active Directory, Office 365, Win 10, again, really anything with modern workplace stack. I'm based out of just north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Excited to be here today talking about Ignite, doing a quick Ignite wrap up here with one of my counterparts. He's known for his website, justdothebasics.com, as well as a weekly Security Matters newsletter. So Jeremy, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I was trying to turn on my video here, and it's not working for some reason.
Okay.
So Jeremy Windmiller, Enterprise Security Architect with Microsoft Healthcare, based out of Indianapolis, and cover, I don't know, 30 to 40 accounts here in the Midwest, from providers to payers to pharma and biotech, and actually have a background in healthcare of being with a provider just a little over 9 years before coming to Microsoft about 6.5 years ago. So thanks for having me, Scott.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for being here. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn off my camera so we can focus on the content here on the screen. So here we go. It's going to be a little bit more PowerPoint today than normal, just because we are talking about Ignite 2020 that here just wrapped a little over a week ago. So Jeremy and I both have a bunch of content to share, so let's just get to it. All right, the first thing that I do want to call out is this nifty site that was published as part of Ignite, and this is the Ignite Book of News. I'm actually going to kick over to it real quick so you can actually see the site itself. And this really has just all of the major announcements that came out as part of the Ignite conference. It's super easy to navigate. You can see it's broken down by Azure, business applications, just innovation, industry cloud, Microsoft 365, and down here in the corner, Windows, Edge, and devices. But here's our section right here, security, compliance, and identity. So there's a ton of content in here that you can drill into, and you can really get the gist of what these announcements are. If you do still want to go out and watch those sessions, you still have to go over to the Ignite page itself and look for that content. This really is just a summary of the announcements, but it's a great resource just to kind of have in your back pocket. So I wanted to touch on that first. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of what I thought was an impactful and rather major announcement around our ATP stack, and that was really the Microsoft Defender rebranding. And Jeremy, I don't know if this has come up with your customers, but I've already had several customers where I've had to touch on this and cover really what this has meant here in just the last week and a half. So as part of the conference, Microsoft announced the rebranding of all of our XDR technologies, and we put them underneath this Defender brand. So we really are unifying all of our tech here, and now it's a super powerful, comprehensive XDR solution that prevents, detects, and responds to threats across, like you see here in the middle of the screen, across identities, endpoints, applications, email. Go to the right here, we got IoT, infrastructure, cloud platforms. It's more than just a rebranding with the Ignite announcements. We didn't just get rid of ATP and then just call everything Defender and call it a day. There were additional things that were added here. So there's additional multi-cloud support, including through Azure Security Center, integration with like Google Cloud and AWS. And of course, with how everything's growing out, there's multi-platform support for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, and even iOS. So it really is becoming the most comprehensive XDR, or maybe it already is, with the broadest platform coverage on the market. So this is something, again, our UIs, our documentation, everything is catching up to this. So just watch for where it says Microsoft Defender, or watch where it says ATP. It's really the same thing now, so it's interchangeable. Defender is no longer just Defender on the endpoint. Now it's Microsoft Defender across all of our ATPs. So, for example, a renaming of Office 365 ATP is now Microsoft Defender for Office. It's now Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft Defender for Identity. So just watch for that. It's not something that necessarily, like I said, it's not necessarily reflected throughout all of the documentation and through all of the UIs as of yet. So it's just something to keep an eye out for. All right, with that, I'm actually going to kick it over to Jeremy for a little bit here and have him cover the items that he feels were some of the most impactful announcements from Ignite.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
So Scott mentioned in his opening about the Book of News, and that's a real great resource for a high-level, comprehensive summary of everything that happened and announced at Ignite. The problem with the Book of News, or the challenge with the Book of News, is that it's so high level that there's a lot of details that you have to dig through in order to actually get to the actual announcements at a product level. And so what I did is I picked through the Book of News and all of our blog posts and actually compiled a deck for customers. And I'm going to share this at the end on how you can go find this. That's very specific to security and compliance product updates. So let's dig in here on the actual announcements. So I'm going to start off with identity and endpoint. And I'm calling out the ones, there's a few additional identity ones, but the reality is they're kind of far off for the healthcare customers. And so I didn't include them in this deck. They're worth knowing, and you'll probably see them in the write-ups, but really it's focusing on what's important to healthcare customers. So when it comes to Azure Active Directory, there's kind of two key ones that were called out, and that was that the Azure AD Conditional Access API, which you can get to the graph and pull into third-party applications, even Power BI or SIM, is now in general availability. I think the big announcement was really around, and identity is around Azure AD Application Proxy. And if you're not familiar with this, this is an on-prem agent that allows customers that use Azure Active Directory to make their on-prem applications available via Azure Active Directory authentication. What we added was the ability to do header-based authentication, which is the most widely popular, I would say, legacy authentication based upon common attributes that you may see in Active Directory in order to authenticate to a web-based application on-prem, and we're now supporting that in the cloud with Azure AD and Azure App Proxy. Before, this had to be done with a third-party partnership. We had a few that we worked with there. So those are some key Azure Identity ones. And for reference, Azure AD Application Proxy has been one of the most widely adopted technologies during the work from home scenario we're in, because it does provide that on-prem access to common web applications that customers need to get to when they're not necessarily on a corporate device. Maybe they're coming from their home machine. Go ahead, Scott.
I was just gonna say real quick there. One of the ways that I've seen App Proxy used pretty heavily here recently because of that scenario is actually presenting out remote desktop. Are there any other ones that you've seen or worked with your customers on getting configured, and maybe even something specifically around this header-based auth?
No, I haven't seen anything around the header-based yet, Scott. I think it's just a matter of time, especially with the providers that I work with. The most common ones I've seen for Azure App Proxy outside of remote desktop has been around we want to provide access to our on-prem intranet, so they can customer or employees working at home can get access to that without actually putting it in Azure or exposing it to the internet. Other applications include like more traditional on-prem HR systems that haven't necessarily made their way to the web, and even timekeeping for that matter. And so those are kind of the ones I've seen be the most common that they're exposing via App Proxy. A couple other items that aren't necessarily identity related, but they're more device that I think are key, really key, especially in healthcare. Is one is that Microsoft Endpoint Manager, or what was formerly known as Intune and SCCM together, now we'll be able to manage Windows Virtual Desktop. If you're not familiar with Windows Virtual Desktop, it's very similar to a remote desktop you'd run on-prem, but we're running it in Azure. And now you can manage that with Intune and be able to deliver applications. So that's a big announcement for the ability for admins to be able to manage not only their traditional Windows-based devices, but now they can do it with Windows Virtual Desktop as well. And then the last one is Microsoft Tunnel, which is part of Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And it's really allowing your traditional mobile devices of iOS and Android to be able to establish a tunnel from those devices back to on-prem resources that they may need to get access to. So you may develop an app that's specific to your organization, but all the data, the back-end portion of that is still on-prem. And so Microsoft Tunnel allows to do this, and this really shores up a gap in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager solution that we've been trying to tackle for a while. So this is a pretty big announcement for those folks that manage mobile devices. One other thing I've added to this deck, and I'm going to skip past all the subsequent slides like this, but I've actually added in a slide that calls out how to go get sessions on each of these. So when you see me post this at the end of the session, you'll know, hey, I can click here and go find these individual sessions as well. So it's just part of this deck. Scott mentioned the rebranding. So it's M365 Defender, and then here's all of the subsequent renaming names that are in the deck. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but you can get an idea of, if you're trying to play along at home, here's how the different names rolled out, and they do fall under all the XDR solutions that Microsoft has within M365 Defender. If there's anything on this particular slide to call out and worth reading, I mean, they're all good stuff, but the first one, it kind of hits on that whole SIM and XDR announcement we made that Scott hit upon at the beginning. This is an announcement worth reading through in detail. I didn't call out any specific bullet points because the whole article is worth reading. And what's key about this particular announcement is that when you look at what Microsoft is trying to do within the M365 Defender space, is that you take all those products that were on the previous announcement, historically those each individual solution, if a customer was licensed for that, you would actually have to have a connector for each one of those to send out to a SIM, and then somebody within a SOC would actually have to go correlate all those alerts that are coming out of those products. And that's a very time-consuming process, no matter how large or small your security operations is within your organization. And so with M365 and the XDR technology, we're bringing together with all of those components, from email to endpoint to identity and even cloud platforms. We're actually doing that correlation within the platform itself. So it's a single incident that may be going out to a SIM, whether that be Sentinel or a third-party SIM. We're trying to do that correlation for you and make it easier on security operations and have a more streamlined approach. Oh, Scott, if you want to chime in on there with anything on that announcement or not.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head. At the end of the day, there's so much signal coming out of all of these tools, and as everybody's cloud estate just continues to expand, having automation step in and be able to bring together multi-cloud events into a single incident is crazy powerful. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. Scott kind of mentioned this at the beginning on mobile threat defense for the platforms. It's Defender is moving beyond just traditional endpoints of Windows, Mac, and Linux. We're now in the mobile space. We announced Android in public preview earlier this year. Now at Ignite we announced the Defender for iOS coming in public preview, and it should be with any time for the next couple of weeks. So that's a pretty big announcement, and kind of cements our coverage across platform. And we've got some enhancements to do in all these, but you can tell where the product is going. A big one, and this is a huge one for customers I've worked with that have adopted was Defender ATP, but now Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. one of these days I'll get converted over to the new names. It's going to take some time, but is macOS Threat and Vulnerability Management. This is a piece of the EDR, what we originally had in the original Defender ATP client was missing, and customers have been clamoring for this because it'll give them insight to what potential exposure they have on their Mac endpoints, especially if they have a large Mac presence within their enterprise. And so this is a big one coming out. The next one is interesting. I'm actually, I would love to get Scott's input on this, but seems like this should have been a kind of a default from the beginning, but I'm glad it's now in the product. And that's within Microsoft Defender for O365, or previously known as Office ATP, you can actually denote what are the priority accounts. So if you want to target the C-suite or individual, like maybe in healthcare, maybe it's individual physicians or whatever, as a priority account, you can. So it gives you a little bit more granular visibility on which accounts are getting threats sent to them via email. And so, Scott, you got any thoughts on this one? Because this seems like a no-brainer. We'd want to have this in the product.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the key thing here for me is that, as you're looking to, train the models that are going to learn about a particular customer's environment and identify where the threats are, feeding those models this extra piece of information on which accounts to really specifically pay attention to. I think that's a powerful element. They can just get you better results even faster. So I agree. It's great that we're now plugging this gap. It would have been nice to have before, but it's here now. So at least we get to use it moving forward.
All right, completely agree. The last one I'm gonna hit up on this, and there's one in the middle. I'm not gonna really spend some time on now, but it's definitely worth reading and diving into around keeping users safe. But I thought the other key announcement, and this is again big in healthcare and actually with any customer, is the announcing of the new or the updated attack simulation. We've had attack simulation in Defender for Office 365 for some time, but it hasn't really met up to the needs of customers, and the product team realized that. And so what they've been spending at least a year, not quite a year, I guess just a little under a year, is really revamping the attack simulation and providing additional scenarios in order to have internal phishing campaigns so you can educate your internal customers within your organization. And what's nice about it is that we've partnered with a company that actually provides additional training on top of that simulation. So I think this is a big one for healthcare customers because they're most likely, in some cases, paying a third party to provide this, not only the attack simulation, but also the training that's after the fact. And so this provides an opportunity to consolidate that into one platform, not only from an email protection with Defender for O365, but also in the attack simulation and training. So I think it's a huge product update there as well. So let's now talk about Defender, Azure Defender, and Sentinel. We rebranded only the Microsoft 365 side of things, but we also did the Azure side of things and rebranded from security to Defender in Azure. A couple items to point out here is that there's always significant enhancements to Azure Sentinel. It's a weekly update, whether it's from connectors or new functionality to new workbooks, to new playbooks within the product. But some key ones that they called out during Ignite that are now available in public preview is UEBA that can be enabled for some entity profiles as you're doing your threat hunting. You can also bring in threat intelligence feeds beyond what is provided with a Microsoft service and Azure Sentinel. You can bring in third-party feeds as well. And then there's just some updates to machine learning, and then a big one was IoT, and ability to bring in IoT alerts and signals to be able to have a comprehensive view from a SIEM perspective in Azure Sentinel was a pretty big update. The other one I'll call out in here is the Azure Security Benchmark. Customers want to leverage these benchmarks to understand how their environment and their security stacks up to a given framework or benchmark in order to put certain security controls in place. So that's a pretty big call out. Last but not least, there was some updates in regards to CyberX integration into Azure Defender, and some updates. A couple of these have been called out. They just spent some time on it. Was additional service support for customer lockbox, and then updating the encryption for data at rest and in transit. So some good announcements around Azure Defender and Sentinel. So we're move on to Scott's favorite topic, and that's compliance. And that's that's an internal joke, but we'll keep it between Scott and I. But we'll hit upon this. But there were, I'll give kudos to the actually all the product groups that was announcements that they made at Ignite. But the product group the product groups that handle the compliance space, they have really been on it and delivered a wealth of content and new updates this year. Starting at the top, Microsoft Information Protection, which is formerly known as Azure Information Protection, is now it has integrations with third parties in Symantec, McAfee, and Relativity and VMware. And these are big updates from a data protection, a compliance workflow that we just haven't seen adoption up to this point, and now it's integrated as part of a third party with these third parties. So that's a big key for a lot of customers. I'll use Symantec as an example. A lot of customers have invested substantial amount of time and money to deploy Symantec over the years, because it was the industry leader, and for them to adopt our SDK and with information protection is big, so they are able to do the integrations. That's a big one there. A couple other ones I'll call out on the screen because I can't get through all of these because we'd be here for hours. Is we're now expanding the data loss prevention that has been kind of a stable in O365 for years, is now being integrated into Microsoft Cloud App Security. So we're bringing that cohesive approach for data protection across all of our tools that do data protection, from your traditional O365 DLP to even Microsoft Information to Microsoft Cloud App Security. We're trying to, have a seamless experience, not only from an admin, but also at the end user perspective. So that's a big one. The Microsoft Graph for Teams DLP went GA, and that's the ability to pull out signals from Teams DLP policies into a third-party application, kind of like I mentioned before, with the Azure AD conditional access API. So that's been a long time coming for some customers for that to go GA. Some additional, moving on down, some additional sensitive information types for covering some regulations in the compliance workspace. Even if you just look at the United States, and obviously there's, if you look globally, it's even more expansive, is compliance regulation continues to evolve. It's well past the days of GDPR. We're now down to country-specific regulations. In the United States, we're down to state-specific. And so the compliance stack keeps adopting those regulations to make sure that the product is able to adhere to those, and customers are able to adopt those frameworks into O365. One that has been in this same announcement, I'll call out here, kind of in the middle, has come up for a couple of my providers. And Scott, I don't know, or not providers, but payers. I don't know, Scott, if you've had this requirement, but I've got a couple of providers based upon their contracts with the government, is that they require customer key for O365 to be implemented so that they can control the key. And now that's coming for Teams. And so that's been a big, it's actually kind of been a key item they've been looking for. And so now that that's coming out and was announced at Ignite, is a huge win in that payer space where it's a requirement because of some of their contracts. And Scott, I don't know if you've came across this in any of your customers or not thus far.
Yep. Specifically in that payer space with government contracts, it comes up very, very, very commonly. So that's a requirement that's a pain for them to deal with. But now we have the tools here in the platform to help them get there.
Yep. So what Some other key announcements down here just around information governance and records management that customers have been asking for, and it's actually making the product more rounded out in regards to retention around Yammer and Teams, as well as recordings. So a lot, continue to build out the ability to do that retention within the product stack. Mm-hmm. There's one I'm gonna hit on this, and there's one I missed. I want to call out as well that it's in one of the announcements. I just missed it. Is around e-discovery. There's additional new content that you can link from OneDrive and SharePoint. This is key, especially when you're doing investigations with a third-party legal counsel. So that's a big update. The one here is the new audit events. So last spring, we actually announced Advanced Audit as part of an additional SKU that can be licensed that really focuses on those really true detailed logs that customers need. Example I always bring up is that there's one in there for email reads to know if you had an email, to see if an email had been read as part of a mailbox breach. We've added to that Advanced Audit, and there's several new audit events that if you're licensed for that particular SKU, you'll be able to benefit from additional detail logging, and it now has a 10-year retention. I'm going to slide back one slide just to see if it's on here, and I missed it. I know it's in one of these announcements. One of the other big announcements that was in here from a compliance perspective is that we now pulled Compliance Manager into the Compliance Console. So before, Compliance Manager was this tool that customers could go leverage through the Microsoft Security Trust Portal, and they could do their own security assessments based upon different frameworks of HIPAA, ISO, SOC, etc. And they could see how Microsoft adhered to those as well. That has now been pulled into the Compliance Center as the one-stop portal for everything. And so that was a big update, and there's been several changes to that. So you'll want to read about that as well, and it's in one of these links. I apologize for not calling it out, but that was a significant update because it kind of provides that single pane of glass to go look at from a compliance perspective. Scott, did you have anything? Almost done here. Did you have anything you want to add from a compliance perspective based on any conversations you've had with customers since Ignite?
Yeah, you touched on it earlier. It was actually as part of MCAS kind of getting more integrated into DLP and having that ability to create those DLP policies all from a singular console, as opposed to having to do your information protection activities in multiple locations. I think that's been one of the biggest things that I've seen my customers asking for, especially anybody that has to manage more than one Office 365 environment. This is great because we're consolidating, and this is a big effort and a big focus for our product group. So it's nice to see some of this stuff start to come out, just making everything easier for our administrators.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because the easier it is to adopt, the easier it's going to be used for everybody to use, not only from an admin, but from the person, the internal customer, I guess, from their perspective.
To me, simplicity breeds security, right? So exactly. Anytime we make it easier, the better off everybody is.
Yep. So wrapping up, I'm done with the Ignite wrap up for this deck, and hopefully it'll help customers and folks watching this to better understand how to go find this stuff and deep dive in the security compliance space. The way you can go find this is I'm actually going to post this right now on our Microsoft Healthcare blog, so you'll be able to go find it there. So I'm going to go ahead and post it now, and I'm going to confirm that, and it should go out here in just a bit, and you'll be able to see that not only the announcements, but the latest updates in security compliance from Microsoft, and it'll include that deck as well, and so you can download that if you want to pass it along to your team. So Scott, I appreciate the time to allow me to review the Ignite wrap-up from a security and compliance perspective, and now I'll turn it back to you.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Jeremy. So, there's actually a question here that I am going to publish and respond to real quick in the chat. So there it is. So hopefully everybody there can go and download. All right, I am going to reshare my screen because I did have one more thing that I wanted to make sure and show. So let me know. Jeremy, can you share? Can you now see my screen?
I
think
can.
it just came up. Awesome. All right. All right. So this is something that I thought was pretty nifty from an Ignite standpoint. This is something that I use every year. There used to be a third-party tool that you could go and pull down. It was a PowerShell script that would allow you then to go and download the Ignite content, both the videos as well as the PowerPoints or what have you. They've actually taken that tool or something similar and built it right into the Ignite portal itself. So if you have any of the content that's out there, that you want to pull down potentially for reuse or viewing, this was great for when I used to have to hop on an airplane. We don't do that so much anymore, at least not yet. But it's still nice to sometimes pull these videos out of the web browser itself, view it in whatever tool you want, and plus be able to pull down the slide content. So I'm gonna jump back over to the browser and actually show you what this looks like real quick. So I'm over here in Ignite and on the Ignite page, and you can register and go through all of your various different on-demand sessions. If you find something of particular interest, you can you might want to download this stuff. So I'm just going to type in Defender for the sake of something to type in. We can see all of the various different sessions that are then associated with Defender. If I click on one of these, click there, actually click on the right spot, you can see I have this download resources button right over here on the right. And what this will do is it'll pull down a little zip file that I've already grabbed and extracted. Basically what this is, where is it at? Is right there. What it is it's this PowerShell script right here, this download resources, and we don't have to go into the details of what's actually in there. You can pull it down at your leisure and look at it. But basically, it'll allow you to pull down any of these sessions. So here I am on this particular session for Defender. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see I have a session code right there, this IGL 145. So I can copy that. I've already extracted my PowerShell script out to this folder at the, in my C Ignite 2020. So I have it here, but basically all you have to do is just run this script with that session code. And if there is a video or PowerPoints or whatever, it will pull the full content down to your local machine so that you can then view it and do with it what you will. So I think that this is super nice. And I'm actually going to stop that so that it doesn't saturate my link and potentially screw up my presentation. But I think that's a nice tool to have in your pocket in case you like I said, you want to pull this content down and review it offline potentially. So with that, that's kind of the last piece. I have a bunch of links here. This deck itself will be on the HLS blog as well with the recording. So let me take a look here real quick in the Q&A, make sure we wrap everything up, and then we will end the call. Yeah, so actually I'll just answer it. If we download the session content, are we free to share that internally at our organization? Absolutely. It's not for resale and all of that jazz, right? But certainly it's there for educational purposes, so you can pull it down, share it, use it however you need in order to help you better use our products and understand what's happening in and around this space for everybody in your organization. So most definitely you can pull it down and use it. All right, great. Well, I know we're under time, but Jeremy, do you have anything else you want to throw out there? Or if not, I think maybe we'll actually wrap early this week.
I think I'm good, Scott.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. Great stuff. And everybody on the call, we'll make sure we get everything published out to the HLS blog. And we'll talk to you next time.